Hey everybody, it's the king of all Koopas here. Sorry about that. Anyway, welcome everyone to what would be the first episode of Star Wars lore. And I feel like what better way to start than with the whole divide between what is quote-unquote canon, as according to what Disney says, versus what is legends, as well as a small discussion on a subdivision within even legends known as infinites. So, where do we begin? Well, let us go back to where it sort of began, this whole divide, as you would say. Oh, and we'll also sort of discuss the nature of what are known as headcanons and such. Now, back to where it all began, for those who do not recall, and for those who do know, you'll know as soon as I say it. Let us go back 4 years. Yeah, it's about 4 years, and... Wait, hold on, let me do the math. 4 years. It's July when I'm recording this, so 1, 2, 3. So 4 years, 3 months, and 5 days from the date of this recording. It'd be July 30th. Yeah, July 30th of 2018 when I'm making this. The date in question, if you followed my math, is April 25th, 2014. Now, those of you who recall know this date. Some of us, including me, would say this is a day that lives in infamy among the Star Wars community. That was the day that Disney decided to throw the old expanded universe out the window in an attempt to give creative freedom to new stories. Now, I will admit, I do understand why they did this, because, provide room for new stories so they can make money, but I'm not happy about it, for the most part. And pretty much the general rule was, is still, that anything regarding to books, comics, video games, and such that came out before this date were considered, quote-unquote, non-canon, that they were Star Wars legends. And anything after that is the new approved Disney canon, with a few exceptions, like a couple books that were scheduled to come out after that date, but were still considered legends. The thing that comes to my mind immediately is the Imperial Handbook. Which is the 4th book by Daniel Wallace in the Jedi Path series. And then Rebel Files later. That's for a different video. Cooper Reviews. Anyway. So, yeah, that's pretty much where it's sort of the whole debate, if you want to say, started. If you guys could see what I'm doing right now, I'm sort of a person that talks with my hands, so I'm moving my arms around while I'm talking about this. I think it helps add to the atmosphere, even though I don't do webcam stuff. Maybe in the future. So, yeah, that's sort of where it sort of started. Course, there were many in the Star Wars community that were both, some were happy with it, and some were not happy with it. Case in point, me. Because, I, like many others, spent our lives, some of our lives, in my case, I spent most of my life dedicated to everything Star Wars at the time. Books, games, comics. Not so much comics. I followed the storylines. I read up on the storylines and such. And, collecting and video games and all that. Didn't really play all the video games, unfortunately. Getting around to playing some of the best ones because, they got released in a bundle on Steam a while back. Maybe they still do have it in a bundle. Anyway, so let's talk about this whole thing for a minute. Now, am I sad that everything of the expanded universe is deemed Legends? Some parts of it, no, I'm not sad that it's gone. Well, quote-unquote gone, anyway. You got stuff like, the Ewoks movies and TV show, and the Droids show. Holiday special. And, books like The Crystal Star. Yeah! Even though, truth be told, I do have that book. Just for two reasons. One, because that way, when I've collected all the novels I need, I can say I have the complete Star Wars Legends novel collection, including that one. And also, in some ways, there's sort of a pride element by saying that you own the worst Star Wars novel. So, yeah. Now, we'll talk more about this in another video, but let's go into stuff that is probably, you could say, is considered non-canon, even in Legends. Which would be the Infinites label, which, pretty much for those who don't know, Infinites are like what-if scenarios in many ways. Like, the reason it has the name Infinites is because soon after Return of the Jedi came out, there was a what-if comic series that came out called Star Wars Infinities that asked what-if questions, like, say, Episode 4, Luke missed the shot that destroyed the Death Star, what would have happened? And, similar what-if scenarios sort of happened for 5 and 6. Like in 5's Infinities, Luke actually died on Hoth in the Empire Strikes Back Infinity, and then Leia becomes a Jedi in Luke's stead. And then Episode 6 is, the main thing is, of course, Vader gets redeemed, but he still sort of has the armor of Vader, but it gets painted white. And that's like sort of the main thing at the end of that comic. So that's where the label Infinites come from. There were what-if stories. Oh, and for anyone wondering, if you've heard about the comic known as Skippy the Jedi Droid, that's Infinities. That's not Legends, that's Infinities. He almost made it to Legends, but we will talk about that in another video. Now, let's talk about headcanons for a sec. Now, you guys may have heard me talk about this sort of thing before in Bounty Hunter or whatever. In the episodes that got that actually had the commentary. I'm working on that, on re-releasing those videos with actual commentary. So, headcanons, pretty much, as the name states, are what you believe happened. Like, say you want to believe that Star Wars Rebels happened at some point, or no, that Force Unleashed happened at some point along the same time as Star Wars Rebels. That, you could say, is an example of a headcanon. Or no, that's not, like, the best example. I got a better one. And, of course, it involves Mandalore. Of course, it's Mandalore! But with good reason, considering everything that has been construed about that history. Definitely a topic for another video. So, let me give you an example about Mandalore from my own headcanon. I believe that both what we see in the Clone Wars, which I'm so excited that it's coming back for one last season, thank you, that, you know, that the pacifistic Mandalorians, or new Mandalorians as they're called, exist alongside, like, what we see of Mandalore in anything Karen Traviss wrote for the Expanded Universe, where Mandalore is like sort of a foresty planet, sort of. Because if you guys saw, for those of you who have watched Clone Wars all the way through, you would recall how Mandalore, well, the normal surface is, say, like just like a dust-scorched wasteland, except for the biodomes where people normally live. Who's to say, just theoretically speaking, that, say, on one side of the planet, most of the biodomes are linked to Sundari, you know, the capital run by the Duchess of Mandalore. Whereas one or two of the other biodomes on, say, the other side of the planet are what we see in the Karen Traviss novels. Just a thought. So there's that. And of course, you know, there's stuff about reconciling some of the events of Mandalore that supposedly happened around the Clone Wars. Like, and I'll definitely talk about this later, because it is said that there was a renegade clone, one of the first batches, I think it was it Alpha 02? I forget exactly what his designation is, but his name's Spar, later known as Mandalore the Resurrector, that he had been cloned, but he had somehow retained the full memories of his progenitor, Jango Fett, So he deserted the army, went to Mandalore, resurrected the warrior traditions, and allied Mandalore with the Separatists till the Empire showed up. Now, thankfully, sort of Lucasfilm, and the community has sort of already reconciled this sort of stuff for me, that just after the death of Duchess Satine, because we know in canon, when Sidious shows up to sort of face Maul and Savage, that ends up in Savage's death, Maul got captured by his master and held in a secret prison somewhere that he later escaped. Who's to say during that time that Maul was separated, had been in prison, is when Spar showed up and then took over Mandalore. Just what I like to think. Of course, you got the Siege of Mandalore to fit in there. Somewhere. But, I mean, like I said, headcanons, you gotta kind of construe. You gotta take things that are presented and, twist it and bend it a bit in order to make it all fit, Like, here's another example from my own, which I sort of mentioned earlier, the whole thing about how Force Unleashed could take place around the same time as Star Wars Rebels, Of course, or no, even, say, just before Rebels, and that when Mon Mothma makes her cry, as like the active formation of the rebellion, say that's just, like one of the public announcements of the rebellion, because beforehand at the end of the original Force Unleashed, it was just, even though the gathered leaders, Bail Organa, Leia attending through a hologram that Proxy had projected, Garmbel Iblis and Mon Mothma, as well as Starkiller and Rom Koda. Even though Bail had said, therefore let this be an official declaration of rebellion. Then Vader immediately showed up and took everyone there prisoner, except Starkiller, who he left for dead. It was just the small group of them, And sure, the whole thing about Palpatine, or who's to say, that soon after that happened, that, say, Mon Mothma, soon after that whole incident, rendezvoused, with the Ghost Crew, and had that formal declaration, Of course, you got Bail Organa. I mean, Bail Organa's always trying to help people, so there's not really anything wrong there. It's just more so a case of his active participation in the rebellion. Because before, he was trying to portray an image of loyalty to Palpatine, whereas others in the Senate were either arrested or killed, or what have you. Bail and Mon Mothma swore oaths of loyalty to His Majesty, so they could have a good cover while secretly aiding the rebellion. Of course, when the Senate was disbanded and all that, So, It's something you gotta do in your head. And I think it works perfectly well. And further along the lines of my own sort of headcanon, pretty much a lot of it, some of this, like Star Wars Rebels, I can make it fit with my Legends viewpoint. Now, the thing, if you know anything about Master Even Peel, that whole thing with the Coruscant Knights trilogy and Last Jedi, not the movie. There's a novel that was supposed to be sort of a quartet. It was supposed to be the fourth book in the Coruscant Knights series. They sort of removed it and made it stand on its own, even though it's same sort of characters as Coruscant Knights. He's supposed to die in that after Order 66 comes down, but he also was supposed to die in the Citadel arc of Clone Wars, so there's that. Of course, that's a case of stuff that George Lucas says what happened, overriding what happened there. Because, you know, at the time those books were written, nobody knew what Lucas had ideas for what Lucas's ideas were for the Clone Wars, because when the Clone Wars initially was being developed, it was highly secret. Like most of the developers on the Force Unleashed games, which was being developed at the same time as the original parts of, like the first couple parts of Clone Wars, they didn't even know. So, yeah. I think we've covered a lot of ground in this first video. So, that's what I think I'll end it off here. And I want to say this right now. Why don't you guys start leaving comments on this video and any future Star Wars lore videos about topics you want me to cover, and I'll write the scripts for them and then, produce them. So, thank y'all so much, pretty much, for watching. Not really watching, listening to me ramble in this video. I will see you all in the next video, and whatever that might be. Though it might be a brief history of war, of all the conflicts in Star Wars Legends. Probably. Anyway, as I said before, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.